Welcome to another part of the complete Yu-Gi-Oh! Tier list series. The goal of this series is to rank every recognized deck and strategy in Yu-Gi-Oh! As they are in the current TCG format. Decks are tiered on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 is not a deck, and 10 is invalidating everything else in the game. Today's video is about the decks that fall into tier 8, 9, and 10, or the meta decks in the game. Every archetype on this list represents the strongest variant of that deck. For example, Nekroz would be ranked as Dogmatika Nekroz because that is the best variant of the deck. However, Dogmatika on the list would be ranked as something closer to Dogmatika, Eldritch, or an adventure type pile. If you like the series, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It helps these videos get more traction, which makes it easier for me to gather research. Also, on my website, there's a copy of this tier list in full for you to look at, as well as a text document listing all of the decks covered. Meta decks are the decks that commonly dominate every competitive event. These are the decks that most players will only just cover for their tier list. Remember one thing going into this tier. I do put these in a particular order for a reason. These top tiers get kinda funky though. This is because most of these decks can hybridize into each other. It's not uncommon for tournament results to have decks like Punk, Theron, Adventure branded. I'll be showing off mostly deck lists that I think reflect the deck's best competitive performance. At least all of these decks will be showing a topping list. Let's get right into it. Just barely scraping into weak meta is Phantom Knights. Phantom Knights are the Graveyard Wombo combo deck with the ability to crank out 4 negate boards turn 1 and do it again next turn. What the main deck Phantom Knights have is an okay on-field effect, but they have massive recursion abilities when in grave. For example, Torn Scale is a free special summon, and Silent Boots is a free search. But what drives these pieces is the two larger combo enablers of Cherubini of the Burning Abyss and the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche. Cherubini of the Burning Abyss, at the cost of 2 level 3 monsters and some consistency, gives access to the 2 best BA monsters, meaning a free 2 extra monsters. Rusty Bardiche lets us send one of our Phantom Knight cards from deck to grave, the Search a Phantom Knight card. This equates to, at a minimum, 2 monster negates. But Phantom Knights also have access to some powerful wombo combos. Phantom Knights of Break Swords and Artifact Dagda let Phantom Knights abuse Artifact Scythe. Phantom Knights also have their own built-up rank-up magic that can set up for some extra negates. Here's a first-place list from the Chile National Championship by Brayan Pachenko. He opted to strengthen the deck's consistency by adding in a Punk engine. Phantom Knight's biggest issue is consistency. Surprisingly, the Adventure engine doesn't overly hurt this, as Enchantress is a free level 3. Evil Twin are a Link combo recursion deck. The goal of this is to make their Link 4, Evil Twins Trouble Sunny, who can summon back the deck's 2 or lower Link monsters at quick effect speed, while also being a starter and removal option in grave. The deck's 2 lower Links are able to give a draw and a destruction when they're summoned, as well as potentially being able to summon out monsters from the graveyard. This destruction gives the deck the ability to play an Artifact Scythe engine to enable Artifact Scythe block. The Evil Twin main deck is very light, consisting of 9 Searchers, one of which burns the opponent throughout the game, and a potential 9 to 12 monsters. This leaves room for around 20 staple cards and or hand traps. This is how the deck makes up for its lackluster built-in disruptions. Here's a top 8 list from James M. from a New Zealand regional. It's a solid 12 hand traps plus crossout plus forbidden droplets, and that's just a whole lot of flexibility. Ritual Worlds are the toxic monster spam deck that first sprung into relevancy by being able to make True King of all Calamities really consistently. Now that that's banned, the deck just makes a whole lot of everything. The deck functions by having its main deck monsters summon themselves out the field by sending another Virtual World card from the deck to the graveyard. The cards sent to grave then have additional engrave effects to help trigger other card effects. The deck's 2 main levels are 3 and 6. This gives the deck access to some of the best ranks and synchros in the game. The deck's own boss monster, Virtual World Kyuubi Shinshin, is a self-recurring Macrocosmos on legs. What the deck likes to do this format is abuse Fairy Tale Snow and Beatrice Lady of the Eternal for value. The deck's abilities to dump a lot of cards into the graveyard is perfect fodder for Snow's banish requirements. From there, the deck can play into a Sword Soul Chingying for more removal. More generic variants of Virtual World do top, although the Snow list is more popular. Here's a top 8 list by Jonathan Malga from the South American National Championships. This list is running a lot of 3-ofs, as the Virtual engine is almost entirely all usable. Shaddoll are the OG Fusion Control value deck. They're held up by sheer popularity and the card El Shaddoll Window. Shaddoll Window does 3 things. First, it has destruction protection from card effects. Second, Window recurs spell and traps when sent to graveyard. Last, she limits both players into special summoning only once per turn. This is one of the best floodgate monsters in the game, and it can stop quite a few decks dead in their tracks. Because Window is immune to destruction, it forces your opponent into opening a blowout card like Droplets, or an effect negate like Impermanence. Outside of Window, the deck has 2 main methods of fusion summoning, either with Shaddoll Fusion, who lets us use materials from the deck if our opponent controls a monster summoned from the extra deck, or we can use Shaddoll Schism, which lets us banish materials from the field or grave to summon. Shaddoll monsters when sent to grave have a variety of useful effects, like drawing a card, popping a spell or trap, or just summoning a Shaddoll monster in deck. The Shaddoll extra deck opens us up to a variety of effects, like Construct, who's both a free send and battle removal, or Alpacone, who is a monster negate. Apcalone also has a fun effect when sent to graveyard, of letting the player search any Shaddoll card from deck or grave. This means if Alpacone can be sent to graveyard, the deck has access to the Shaddoll extra deck, and specifically El Shaddoll Winda. This is why Shaddolls are commonly paired with Dogmatika, even if Shaddolls do also work with Invoked and Branded. Here's a top 4 list from Richmond Regional by Ryan McGee. He's making use of a Fright for a Patchwork engine for free extenders and easier access to cards like Guardian Chimera. This list also uses Invoked and Shaddoll. Now, if you want to play this deck on Master Duel, check out my list right here. Gotta get my promotion in here somewhere, because YouTube ain't gonna do it anymore. Invoked are a deck that turns a normal summon into a free negate or free OTK. Basically, the deck's fusion spell lets the deck use materials from field, hand, or either graveyard to make a fusion. Alistair the Invoker searches the fusion spell when he's normal summoned, and the deck's field spell searches him. The fusion spell then lets us put back Alistair into her hand after he's used for a fusion summon. This means the deck has 7 cards that search out a fusion combo without using our other cards in hand. Thanks to the Link 1 Salamangreat Great Illumirage and Secure Gardener, the deck always has access to the attributes of cards acquired for the deck's powerful fusion monsters. Invoked Mechaba is an Omni-Negate for a discard, Invoked Purgatrio is an OTK enabler, and Invoked Argrades is a monster pop on summon and on our opponent's special summon. Overall, this makes Invoked an amazing engine for decks that don't need their normal summon, like Shaddoll, Dogmatika, Eldritch, Branded, and Generator, and a whole lot more. Here's a top 8 list from the Brazil National Championship by Mateus Henrique. This list opted to run Invoked with Branded and Dogmatika. Weirdly enough, this list, as well as a lot of other, have opted to not run Invoked Purgatrio, instead of relying on other forms of OTK pressure. Tri-Brigade and Lyral Lusk are another 2 decks that have blended together. Despite how versatile Tri-Brigade has been throughout the tier list, this has consistently been one of the best performing Tri-Brigade variants. So how does this deck work? Well, the Tri-Brigade portion of the deck makes free links by banishing materials from graveyard. Any Beast, Winged Beast, or Beast Warrior type link can be made. This combo can be done by discarding the card Tri-Brigade Fractal as a starter. Secondarily, the Tri-Brigade engine can abuse the cards Tri-Brigade Shurag, the Ominous Omen for extra removal, and Tri-Brigade Revolt for crazy disruption and recursion plays on the opponent's turn. Tri-Brigade Revolt is searchable, so the Tri-Brigade engine is quite powerful. Lyral Lusk are a level 1 Winged Beast spam deck that happens to work very well with links. The main deck monsters perform a combination of effects that special summon themselves or other cards, or they can search out pieces directly from the deck. The card Lyral Lusk Bird Call is a search 1, special 1 from hand. This is one of the most insane support cards in the entire game, and I think a case could be made that a lot of rogue decks could become relevant with this card. That's not to say Lyral Lusk would be unplayable without it, but having such a strong starter and extender goes a long way. The Lyral Lusk extra deck is a fantastic toolbox of everything the deck could need. Ensemble Blue is a quick effect compulsory evacuation effect, Recital Starling is a searcher, and the symbol Nightingale can attack directly for Zeus plays. Lyral Lusk are very good at playing around hand traps, although with Recital Starling being hit to 1, the ban list kinda has kneecapped this deck's power ceiling. Here's a second place list by Eric Lima from the Brazil National Championship. This list has a ton of graveyard hate, using both 3DD Crow and Harstlinger, the Desperate Doom Eagle. That's right, I'll pronounce it like that. Adagnister are a link combo deck that has 2 goals. First, to make their own Towers monster, the Arrival Cyverse, and the second goal is to abuse generic Cyverse plays. Generic link plays the deck tends to make are Decode Talker Heat Soul for value, and Access Code Talker with Update Jammer for easy OTKs. The deck's built-in Towers monster regularly hits 4 to 5k attack and makes free tokens. But the star of the show is the surprisingly resilient engine. The deck's field spell, Ignister Island, lets you special summon multiple Adagnister cards from the hand. The field spell is searchable off the deck's Link 1, making it an insanely powerful extender. Quite a few of the main deck Adagnister monsters get searches or other solid effects when they're summoned at all. The Cyverse extra deck gives an insane number of extenders. Overall, this leaves Adagnisters as a very good Cyverse combo deck. Here's the top 8 list from Quan Zo from the Denmark National Championships. It's running a solid 12 hand traps and making use of the variety of effects the deck has access to. Dogmatika are an extra deck combo engine. Basically, if a deck can either not care about special summoning from the extra deck or can do all their summoning first, Dogmatika can be a crazy extending deck. Dogmatika simply let us use our extra deck as a toolbox by sending cards from the extra deck to the grave. Nadir Servant searches a Dogmatika and dumps an extra deck card from deck to graveyard. There's a ton of options with this. Natis for a simple pop one, Titanclad for Dogmatika search, Herald for ritual shenanigans, Shaddoll Alpacone for the entire Shaddoll extra deck to become suddenly possible. But the only real downside to this is Nadir's Servant is semi-limited. The other way this deck has to get extra deck dumping is through Dogmatika Maximus, who makes both you and your opponent dump 2 cards from the extra deck to graveyard. This, needless to say, is very risky in a branded meta, or against quite a lot of the powerful decks this format. Maximus is very high risk, high reward. Ecclesia is an extra searcher, and Fleur-de-Lis is a monster negate. Dogmatika excel at pushing out already powerful boards. As such, there are a large number of decks they can be blended with. Some highlights are Eldritch, Invoked, Branded, Shaddoll, Nekroz, and Adventure. Here's a top 8 list from a WCQ regional by Danny. This list combined Dogmatika with Invoked and also used DPE. This list was running Verte, but honestly it's the closest thing to being up to date that still ran the full set of Dogmatika. You can notice that this list is running the Shaddoll Alpacone and Shaddoll Schism engine for the full combo, as well as having options with Natis and Titanclad. Our next deck is Eldritch. Eldritch are the trap zombie control deck whose main gimmick is having all of its spells and traps be able to pull out other spells and traps when they're in graveyard. This gives Eldritch one of the best grind games in the game, as well as a back row engine deck that can work with a lot of other engines, such as the previously mentioned Dogmatika, but also things like Despia, Theron, Punked, Invoked, and Shaddoll. Eldritch's main trap disruptions are a card pop, a DD Chrome, and a spell of trap negate. It might not seem like a lot, but most of these traps are trap monsters, so they can also be used as leak fodder as well as recurring themselves out of the deck. The only real cost to this is having to summon out Eldritch the Golden Lord for those disruptions. Luckily, Eldritch himself has an amazing effect for summoning himself, as well as good removal options. But Eldritch have a trap and multiple spells that just summon him right out the deck. Eldritch are also quite notorious for being able to abuse a lot of generic floodgates, like Skill Drain. Here's a top 8 list by Giovanni Coral from the Central American National Championship. He opted to combine Eldritch with Dogmatika, Branded, and Invoked. There's a lot going on in this list, but it's a really cool concept of using Branded Fusion or Invoked for a starting play, and then just blowing out your opponent with Eldritch. Eldritch's biggest problem is that it's a back row deck in a format with Lightning Storm, and Eldritch cards require Eldritch to be on the field, and that summon can be disrupted. Welcome to a very obnoxious corner of the tier list. It's Drytron in all of its variants. There are 3 of them, and how good or bad they are is a hot mess. The 3 variants are Herald, Megalith, Magikey, and Pure could be considered a 4th. All these lists have topped at some point very recently, and are honestly all on the verge of merging into one hybrid ritual combo deck. But let's get into what Drytrons do, and then I'll talk about its variants. Also, Magikey have been moved into tier 5. It's kind of like they got solved halfway through the tier list development, so that's cool. But adding in 1 or 2 cards to Drytron doesn't make Magikey a meta deck. Drytron are a ritual deck that have tons of synergy and just have an insane number of extenders and starters. All of them decks main deck monsters tribute 1 from hand, to special summon themselves and search 1 or special 1. They have access to an untargetable searcher, and one of their spell cards is a straight up summon 1 from deck. Let's go back to the main deck monsters. They provide a tribute outlet for cards like the Cyber Angels to set up for any ritual monster to be summoned. Drytrons also have a rank 1 XYZ that's an easy spell or trap negate that can still use its materials as materials for ritual summon. Drytrons can also use Herald of the Orange Light for extra negates and anti-hand trap power. So our first and probably worst variant is Herald. The goal of this build is to make Herald of Ultimateness with a ton of materials in hand to mass negate our opponent's board, all while using the aforementioned Herald of Orange Light and Divine Elf Herald for value and synchro materials. While, since Eva got hit, this deck definitely isn't the best deck in the game, it still is very strong, and does the most to stretch what I'm defining as a deck on the tier list. Now for a significantly better build is Megalith Drytron. Megalith are a band of rock ritual monsters with the ability to use themselves as ritual spell. Megalith are quite decent on their own, that have really found a niche in becoming a part of the Drytron hive mind. It really revolves around 3 main monsters: Megalith Aertron, who's a protection effect, Megalith Ophio, who's a level 4 that searches, and Megalith Fool, and Megalith Fool, who can become a level 4 and recur a ritual monster in grave. Can summon, save free link materials and amazing options. Here's a topping list of this variant of Megalith. This list is by Jordy Wang, who made top 4 of the Spanish National Championships. I appreciate the one of anti-spell fragrance. It's respectable. Our next variant of Drytron is the Magikey/Pure Drytron. Basically, what if we just honed in on those classic Drytron combos, but replace Herald with a much easier to summon Magikey ritual? Magikey Battle Buster searches the Trap Magikey Unlock, which is a spell of trap negate that forces all face-up monsters to be locked into a single attribute. Here's the topping list for the Magikey build of Drytron. This list is by Alexander Manok, who took first place at the Bulgarian National Championship. As you can see, this list is also running Megaliths. The Drytron hive mind will inevitably consume all. My prediction is that Drytron will just become like Dragon Link, and cannibalize every new ritual deck like Dragon Link does to every new dragon combo. Here's where I moved up ABC. Well, the value control deck of Sky Strikers is still going super strong. What Sky Strikers do is seek to abuse value cards like Sky Striker Mobilize and Gage, Sky Striker H Kari, and Sky Striker H Shizuku for value, and an answer to every situation. Let's look at the answers. First off, we have the Sky Striker Maneuvers, which are a simple pop 1 monster and spell. Sky Striker Mecha Shark Cannon is a DD Crow that can set you up for link plays. Sky Striker Mecha Module Widow Anchor is a monster negate that steals the monster. The aforementioned Kagari and also Mecha Module Multi-Roll get to recur these cards for basically free. That's insane. But in order to compete, it needs something more, and that something more is Mystic Mine. And sometimes Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer. Here's the top 8 list from the German National Championships. This list was by Lucas Hortzman. It's a very refined list for Sky Striker. It's nothing but the core of what's necessary and 2 Mystical Space Typhoon. But that's what Sky Strikers get to. If a player plays well with Sky Strikers, it can take the player very far. Rockets or Dragon Link are a set of dragon cards that all synergize together for crazy combos. I'll break down a few of the key combos. Quick Launch can pull out a rocket card, which can make Striker Dragon, which can search Boot Sector Launch. Another combo is to use Chaos Space on the 2 Wyvern Busters. Yet another combo is Red Rose Dragons, which can pull themselves out of deck when used as synchro materials. Yet another engine is the Punk engine, which we'll get to in a later segment. Dragon Link's inboard is some combination of Borreload Savage Dragon, Hieratic Seal the Heavenly Spirism, Baron de Fleur, whatever gets brought in by the outside engines. Also, Dragon Link work wonders with Adventure. Dragon Link do have a fair presence on the ban list. By being so generic and splashable, a lot of the extra deck extenders have been hit. Here's a top 8 list from the Switzerland National Championship. This list was piloted by First Karatas. It's a 50 card list. Dragon Link are very prone to going over 40 cards. More cards means more extenders and less chance of drawing bricks. This is also a good place to mention that Dragon Link can make use of Cyframe Gear Gamma, as a lot of its starters aren't necessarily activated in the monster zone. Flunderies are a normal summon banish synergy deck that are able to make use of a ton of powerful synergies for value. At their core, Flunderies monsters work by having lower monsters that can chain together normal summons, and searches to then tribute into their big card Flunderies and Impen, who is both a spell search and prevents the effect of all special summon monsters from being activated. And Impen has some battle protection. Flunderies are constantly able to add themselves back from being banished, as well as chain blocking their effects. The deck's field spell lets the deck summon on the opponent's turn with funny results, such as making Rise of the Mega Monarch, Bear Statue of the Torrent, and Mist Valley Apex Avian. A poor hand can struggle with hand traps, but this deck has a ton of ways to play around that. The deck can run up to 9 pot cards, be it Prosperity, Extravagance, or Duality. The deck has 2 spell card Searchers and Terraforming, so consistency is almost always very good. The deck can make use of Dimensional Shifter, who's extremely powerful in just about every meta, and the deck can search DD Crow. Here's a top 8 list from the Brazil National Championships by Bruno Ferraz. It's a very tight and clean list, making use of Rise of the Mega Monarch and Mist Valley Apex Avian. This is a very tight list, running everything at its perfect ratio. Theron are a deck or engine that synergize around being able to special summon themselves by equipping cards from the graveyard. The requirements for such are either another Theron card or a specific type relating to what every type of Theron the monster is. This gives big synergy to machine and plant decks. Theron King Regulus is a big playmaker of the deck. He gives access to a quick effect Omni Negate, and he still has the Theron effect to special summon himself. Backing him up, we have the deck's 2 big searchers, Theron Liliboria and Theron Disco Coliseum. This means Theron have a consistent Omni Negate. Combine this with engines like Adventure, Punk, Sun Avalon, and even ABC, and you have a very solid set of disruptions. Here's the top 8 list from a WCQ regional by Alan D. As you can see, Theron are really a hybrid deck at their core. This list is incorporating 2 decks that are about to show up in this tier, Adventure and Punk. This list is abusing artifact Scythelock, as well as Naturia Beast, for an extremely powerful board. Punk are a cool spam summon deck that are just a little too generic for their own good. What makes this deck tick is a few key cards that are practically free. No Punk Foxytune can discard herself and another card from hand to summon any non-level 8 Punk from the deck. No Punk Zia Min lets us pay 600 life points to search a Punk monster. And no Punk Ogre Dancer lets us discard him to search any non-level 8 Punk monster. Lastly, no Punk Deer Note, when she is sent to the graveyard from field, summons a Punk monster from grave. These cards in combination with each other make a very free, very flexible, and very powerful summon engine. At its most basic, the deck can set up for just a Halki Fibrax and a level 3 or 8 monster, but the combo can also set up for a free rank 8 XYZ in value. Of course, these things can get more value than what I'm listing. It's important to remember that this can usually be achieved without normal summoning and only using 1 or 2 cards in hand. Emergency Teleport can also start the combo. If a deck commits to a higher number of Punk cards, the Punk Fusion can pull any 2 Punk monsters out of the deck, or the Punk Synchro can be used as a quick effect, double compulsory evacuation device. Even running a large Punk package, the deck can still fit in a lot of hand traps. Remember, your deck doesn't need to make a ridiculous amount of negates if you have hand traps. Hand traps can't be hit by Forbidden Droplet. Here's the top 8 list from the Central American National Championships from Misael Garcia. He opted for using this deck's strength as a synchro engine and combined it with Theron for an extra kick. I really like this deck's usage of Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. Punk are most commonly paired with Theron, but they really do work well with most decks if you try for it. Punk were really hard to rank because a large number of tops for this deck were just other decks using Punk as an engine. I do believe this is a very fair spot for them, but it's only like 2 more weeks before it happens. Tinny and Sword Soul are a last pair of decks that have merged with each other. Sword Soul are a very powerful set of synchro combo enablers, and Tinny are a bunch of free special summons with typing synergy with Sword Soul. Let me explain the basic Sword Soul combos first. Basically, the main monsters of Mo Yi and Long Yuan make tokens which immediately let the player go into a level 8 or level 10 synchro monster. The level 8 synchro monster Sword Soul checks out, searches another Sword Soul monster from the deck, and still has an effect negate. So from the Singer Summon of Mo Yi, the deck gets 2 disruptions, and because both Mo Yi and Long Yuan have when used as material effects, the synchro monster effects can be chain blocked. Mo Yi's skill is to draw one, so have fun not losing a card in hand. And Sword Souls also have multiple searchers to get to this combo. Tinny's work a bit differently. They special summon themselves for free if you control no effect monsters, and can banish themselves from grave for additional effects. With the Sword Soul deck, Tinnies have a variety of purpose. They can be free materials so the deck can make Yazi Evil Yang Zing, or Tinnies can function as removal and recursion options. Tinnies can also make their built-in link monsters for removal options. The Tinny spell lineup also lets the deck set up for basically anything. Here's a topping list that was ran by both Lucas Window and Henry Dopide at the Germany National Championships, who made top 8 and top 16 respectively. It's a very interesting list with a lot of 2-ofs. We can definitely see from this list just how much flexibility the deck has. Adventure's in a bit of a weird spot, being on the tier list at all. It's more so an engine and not fully a deck, but it doesn't feel fair to cover such an impactful set of cards as being significantly lower on the tier list than the representation deserves. There are quite a few decks that do almost exclusively use the adventure cards as their main strategy, so I will count the deck. What Adventures do is set up for the card Wandering Griffin Rider, who is a reusable Omni-Negate, but a lot happens while setting up for this. First, the cards Water Enchantress of the Temple and Rite of Aramisal can search a deck's main card, Fateful Adventure, while also getting a free token. Fateful Adventure lets the deck search Griffin Rider for the cost of a discard and to get a free equip spell in the process. The only real cost to this engine is it doesn't work with decks that are dependent around their normal summon. Rest in peace Invoke. But Enchantress can also summon herself for free, giving so much flexibility to this already stacked engine. I'm not going to show a deck list because I think you all have seen enough of this deck throughout this video. This brings us to the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, Despia. Despia, as a deck, revolve around the card Branded Fusion. Branded Fusion lets us fusion summon one monster that requires Fallen of Abaz using materials from the deck. The deck's fusion monsters immediately let us summon again using the materials we sent to grave. This effectively means that if Branded Fusion can resolve, the deck can effectively do anything. The deck has 2 main ways to get Branded Fusion, being Alibur, Jester of Despia, who searches a branded spell, and Branded Opening, which can summon out Alibur. All in all, with the extenders, this makes the Despia core only like 15 to 20 cards in the main deck. That leaves room for an unholy amount of hand traps, or outside engines like Punk, Adventure, or Shaddoll. In my opinion, the best variant is with the Adventure engine. As we can see from this deck list, which won first place at the Denmark National Championship. This list was by Junda Zhang, and it's very powerful. A key way this deck gets disruption is by fusing into the card Guardian Chimera on the opponent's turn. Chimera lets the player pop and draw cards, depending on where the materials for the summon come from. So all in all, Branded have one of the best 1-card combos in the game, and multiple ways to search it. Synergy with a lot of outside archetypes, and the ability to run a lot of hand traps. As you can see, Branded are extremely strong. Now, for Tier 10. There's nothing here! You. We're not in an overwhelming format right now. There's definitely better decks than other decks right now, but there's nothing that meets the definition of invalidating everything else in the game. We'll see what splites do on release, but for now, here we are. So here's the miscellaneous changes I'm making before we wrap up the series. Mecha Phantom Beast have been moved into Tier 3 after being re-reviewed. Dream Hero got new support, so they get moved higher in Tier 4. Sylvan's got one of the best Link 2s in the whole game, so they move up a little bit in Tier 4, because it's more so just generic plant support. And Sylvans are still held down by their overwhelming problems. Symphonic Warriors move to the top of Tier 4 with the new support. Ice Chain move up a bit in Tier 5 with their new support. I've already said I'm moving up Magic Key to tier 5. The decks are definitely better built now, but still not meta. I'm moving up Libromancer and Sun Avalon into high tier 5. Avalon doesn't top a whole lot, so it's honestly fine in tier 6. And Libromancers are really starting to put in work in several topping lists. The Weather and the new support become competent in tier 6, and Predaplant have enough tops to move up into tier 7. People keep attacking me in the comments about why I didn't rank some decks higher when it didn't have a lot of tops at the time. This gets me into a whole thing about people are just pointlessly awful and toxic when it comes to this series. I believe I called the Neos players brain damaged, but they weren't the ones who sent me borderline death threats. Alright, last up we're going to have a Q&A segment. Will you update the tier list? Yes, I will be updating the tier list sporadically. It won't be every main set, but it's not going to be neglected either. Basically, every new massive format shift, I'll come back and update the tier list. It'll be a fun way to handle ban list reactions too. What sort of playtesting is involved with tiering the decks? Well, I try to playtest every deck in this list. My process for tiering the deck was basically doing a preliminary sort of every deck into a tier. Then I would analyze every deck on the tier and decide if it actually belonged there. This part included looking for tournament results and other people's coverage. Next, for every video, I would go through and play each deck in the tier one at a time, either among friends or just randomly, be it on Dueling Book, YGO Pro, or the occasional in paper deck. While I'm playing the deck, I'd write my summary on what the deck does and how I feel about it. The big downside to this was it took a very long time. At first I'd do this for 1 or 2 decks a night, but as it kept going I'd force myself to cover more and more, until the 70 decks or so would be covered. Some decks didn't get all the playtesting time they needed, and it resulted in some mistakes in tiering. For example, take DDDs. I didn't quite give myself enough time to learn DDDs, which are a very complex deck, and they have quite a few builds, which can dramatically change some of the lines of play. And of course, some decks which I'd played extensively before the tier list series, like Noble Knights or Ghost Tricks, weren't playtested as I had already played them a lot. In conclusion, there's no way I'd ever have been able to do this series in one part like it was originally intended. Well, with any accuracy. Another method of double-checking a deck's placement in tiers is through some benchmark decks. Like if a deck is worse than Blue Eyes, it's definitely casual. Or if a deck is worse than Dark Magicians, it's probably not Rogue. This helped a lot more for the lower decks than the higher decks, which depended a lot more on tournament results than my personal opinions. Would you ever consider hosting tournaments for decks only in one tier? Not really. It was tried already with JCD Godot and Gafar format. I think it's gone well, but it's a bit different from what people keep asking me. I personally don't want to host tournaments, and if I did, they would most likely be a lot more gimmicky than just locked into a single tier. Do you think that archetypes in lower tiers would do well in a speed duel or dueling style format? The answer is overwhelmingly yes. Look at Shiranui. They were meta in duel links for a while. I'd love for a lot of bad pack filler in Yu-Gi-Oh! To get its chance to shine one day. But that's on Konami to actually produce and promote. I've been playing a lot of Duelist of the Roses recently for a secret project, and a roguelike deck building game would do wonders for a lot of these bad archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! About how many sleepless nights did you have while putting this series together? Too many. Honestly, despite how much enthusiasm I initially had for this series, it has worn me out a lot. There's this weird feeling I have when I play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, where I know everything about what a deck can do, but most of the good knowledge is just kind of blocked out by what I learned about useless decks like ninjas or slime. However, I don't regret all the work I put into the series, and it's made me very happy to see all the positive feedback from all of you. Thank you all for watching what's probably been a 4-hour series. You'll tell me when I put the Mega Comp together. It does mean so much. I hope all of you will stick with me in future. I have a lot more plans for big videos outside of deck profiles. I really hope to see you guys in the future. Thank you.